All right, to a headline at interest.co.nz, a site that you and I both like to check from time to time, you more than
Yeah.
me, in terms of irregularity, no doubt. The decision by many homeowners to position themselves for expected interest rate cuts will see an average of over 30 billion a month worth of mortgages needing refixing in the first 6 months of this year. Well, we're already into the first 2 months. That's a huge sum. Will a lot of those mortgages be costing less at the moment of refixing? What can people expect, you think?
Yeah, obviously it'll cost less if the interest rate is much lower. The reason I brought this one to your attention, mate, is it's very important. It's not just the 30 billion. I've just written down some numbers. So I want to highlight to the people, if these are the kind of things, if you can see them coming, you know what could possibly happen, and helps you refix your mortgages or whatever accordingly. So the reason I brought this up was, just think about this: in the entire New Zealand economy, the entire total of mortgage debt is 370 billion, 370 billion. And what this is trying to say is, in the next 6 months, 200 billion of that is going to come for renewal. So it's either on floating or it's on 6 month rates. So out of 370 billion, 200 billion is going to come for refixing. Okay, or it's already on variable rate. So what is that telling you? Half of the New Zealand economy, or half of New Zealand mortgage owners, have the next 6 months where they're going to have to kind of do something. And not just that, by December 25, 304 billion out of the 370 billion. So 82% of New Zealanders are going to have to do something about the mortgages in the next 12 months. So out of 370, 304 billion, 82% of people in the next 12 months are going to have to refix because they're either on floating and stuff like that. So what is that telling you? That people need to keep an eye out on what happens in the next 6 months. Now, if you're somebody who's thinking or speaking to your mortgage broker, to your bank, and are thinking, what do I do? Do I fix now? Do I take a longer term? This is telling you that the Reserve Bank is going to have to possibly keep dropping interest rates, because half of New Zealand homeowners are going to try and fix for a longer term, or going to have to fix at some stage because they're on variable. So if you're thinking whether the Reserve Bank's going to drop interest rates, your answer pretty much sits in the 90% mark, that yes, they will be dropping interest rates, because this is the quick fire way for them to rewrite the whole book, so to speak, in the New Zealand economy. So I know on the 19th of Feb, if I'm not mistaken, they have the next Reserve Bank meeting. And what that means is they might drop it. I've got it here. They started dropping in August 24 from 5.5, and now we're down to 4.25. So they've dropped about 1.25 percentage points since then. And I think it could go to about three-ish. Round figure, just under three, just about three, is where it kind of ends, unless there's some global event that could happen. So I think if people are looking at what do I do, it is not personal financial advice. I'm just saying, if half of New Zealand homeowners are going to have to refix or do something about their mortgages, this is Reserve Bank's chance to reduce the interest rate so people can refix on low rates. And I think ASB, as of this morning, has already reduced interest rates in anticipation of that. They keep saying it's because of overseas funds and investment, but also I'd like people to think through the term deposit rates, right? So they reduce the term deposit rates a lot more as compared to the home loan rates, always the case. But I just thought this would help the New Zealand audience out there to kind of understand, if 200 billion out of 370 billion comes up for renewal in the next 6 months, a very good chance that the Reserve Bank is going to keep dropping interest rates.
So you would only go for a short term fix?
I wouldn't. Again, that is, everyone's scenario is different. Everyone's mortgage is different. I probably wouldn't say that.
But I can, because that's human nature. You hedge your bets, but what do I know?
No, but again, now let's talk through the scenario which you just mentioned. If people go very short term, if they fix it now for 6 months, and let's say Feb, they'll come around July, August, and who knows by then what could have happened in the global economy if a war starts somewhere. Or if some event happens. So again, it depends on the client scenario, exactly what they're trying to achieve.
Right.
When I speak to some of my clients, I also say, if you're not sure most people just have a $600,000-700,000 big mortgage. Ask your bank to break it up into smaller chunks. This is just free advice. So you can have a 500 sitting elsewhere, maybe on a longer factor, so you got certainty with it, and maybe you put 100 or $200,000, which you're trying to pay off faster, on a variable or short term, so you can at least, because you're never going to pay off the 700K immediately anyways. So you might as well focus on the 100 or 200, put it on a shortage term if you think that's what you can manage, because remember, it could also go upwards. But what I'm saying is in the next 6 to 12 months, there's kind of certainty that the Reserve Bank will drop interest rates. But again, having said that, I've mentioned it affects our currency rate. It affects the New Zealand dollar. They have to be mindful. It's a balancing act. But most governments are dropping interest rates, so it's a competitive pressure to keep your currency not falling off a cliff completely.
All right, to wind up, what do you make of the private members bill proposed or presented, about to be presented by New Zealand First, which the headline says here could send bank staff to prison for denying loans to the fossil fuel industry without a valid commercial reason? I think we've seen this coming, the phenomenon of debanking. It started with, well, very publicly, the truckers in Canada. Nigel Farage got hit with it. A whole lot of other people have been debanked because of things that they might have said that the bank doesn't seem to like, or there's a perception it won't be popular and might sully the bank's name if the association was maintained. It seemed to me, I think this is around coal, fundamentally here in New Zealand, and involved the BNZ. I'm just thinking, there are so many businesses that emit. I'm thinking of airlines, probably the greatest emitter when it comes to hydrocarbons anyway, in our part of the world. Well, I'm sure not going to deny any of the airlines banking services because, they fly trails of kerosene exhaust in the sky. So it's kind of feels political and ideological. Do you think this is enough, a move like this from New Zealand First, to scare banks off from being woke, is the word, isn't it? From being woke.
Yes, it's actually called the woke bill. Well, it's called the woke bill. It's actually the Financial Markets Amendment Bill. But I think it's a great move by New Zealand First, and hopefully the government as well supports it. I have in the past said that I don't think government should interfere in personal matters. So in that context, I stick by that, because I think when the government tells banks what to do and what not to do, it's a private organization that should make profit. But having said that, this bill is not saying don't make a profit. The bill is saying you cannot discriminate. And again, in New Zealand, discrimination is against the law, as far as I'm aware. So why are they discriminating based on it being a fossil fuel or DEI and green agenda? So I can tell you through my banking days as well, you are doing a risk profile on a business regardless. So yes, it sounds great. It's called the woke bill. But when you're sitting in a bank and you're doing a commercial loan, you're looking at reputational risk. You're looking at whether the organization pollutes the environment, whether it uses a lot of water, which could be conserved, and all that stuff. So you're rating a business on that. There's a lot more that goes into it, so it's not that simple. But having said that, the reason I think BNZ was brought about in this is, I think in one of our previous conversations, there's a global alliance of banks, and I'd mentioned BNZ was part of that. Now, which was the green agenda. And I think JP Morgan and the HSBCs have literally left that alliance recently. So this would be a good time for BNZ to just front up and say, okay, we're walking away from the alliance. The green agenda is falling apart. BlackRock is kind of saying, okay, we overdid it. The green bonds, greenwashed, we call it, because they're really not that green, if you think about it, because they don't talk about the mining that goes into creating these batteries and these green vehicles. But in this case, the banking sector, all I think the legislation needs to be passed is, it says based on commercial purposes only. And if you think about it, on commercial purposes, fossil fuel is the one that's making the most profit, because the petrol prices go up. Can you go to the gas station and say, hey, I want to negotiate the price of petrol down? You can't. So they have a moat around their business. So if anything, they're not price sensitive. They just carry on. If the price of oil goes up in US dollars, they just increase their prices accordingly. And as I mentioned, when they have to reduce it, it takes them a couple of days to reduce it. So the businesses are profitable, Why are the banks doing it? It's common sense. It is virtue signaling to the green agenda. The banks in New Zealand are just a bit too slow to realize the green agenda is already falling apart and has fallen apart in countries like the US, where people have voted against it. In Europe, they're already finding out now that their gas prices are now gone up more than the petrol prices. In Germany, they shut down all the nuclear farms and now they're burning coal. So the whole green agenda signaling thing, I think Australia and New Zealand and Canada are the three countries who are still doing this rubbish. We should stop. So if our Prime Minister and New Zealand First and all of these parties are serious about bringing back our economy, the amount of contribution that New Zealand does to the pollution is minuscule in the bigger scheme of things. As I said, I visit India quite a lot, and you should see the pollution in India. So it's just virtue signaling. We're hurting our citizens. We're hurting our economy for the sake of saying, look, we're on board. But I think BlackRock recently also did something in New Zealand with some insurance company and a bank. So unfortunately, New Zealanders aren't as awake as the Americans are because it hit them hard. And we had someone as revolutionary as Donald Trump raising his hand and saying, fight, and people got behind him. I think New Zealand needs that. If I wasn't so disgruntled with politics, I might have even run in politics, which I've been asked once, but not for now. But we have elections coming up, and then you'll see in a year or so, and you'll see again the conversation change with an election cycle. That's the unfortunate truth. As much as we say communist countries or dictator-ruled countries are a problem, the good thing is they don't have to try and rely on votes every 3 or 4 years, so they can have a long-term plan. And that's why I'm not saying China is not communist, but China can plan the economy better because they're not trying to win votes every 3 or 4 years. And unfortunately, our politicians are doing exactly that. They have to please a part of the population to try and get reelected again, to keep their jobs, essentially. If you're to keep your job, you have to lie, being a politician.
Just a quick final thought, with the major banks being owned by Australian companies, there's a danger, isn't there, of being dictated to. And how do we know we're being dictated to by banks or by the power elite of a nation, creating effects in other countries like us through their bank-owned banking assets here, as more of a political manipulation than just pure virtue signaling to, a perceived woke client base? You understand what I'm saying? It becomes an instrument of policy, sort of aimed against another country, potentially.
But it is. Most of our banks are owned by the Aussie banks, right? So, and if you think about, I mentioned about, this is absolutely true. Since Donald Trump has come in, the whole DEI and the World Economic Forum agenda has been falling apart. Let's be honest about that. Germany's having elections this year. The French government is in trouble. A lot of the European countries are in trouble. I did mention Australia is going to be in trouble. So Australia also has elections coming up. New Zealand is on a different cycle. And you saw the problems in Canada as well. The Prime Minister is almost kind of resigned. So this is going to happen. The train's coming at them. They just don't realize it. When you talk about the virtue signaling, you've got to understand money runs the world. Okay? So they can dictate the terms, is what they're doing. That's why BlackRock, we invest our money with us superannuation funds, and BlackRock actually uses our own funds against us. I wish New Zealand or Australia could come up, even Australia and New Zealand together, because you know how they're talking about Canada being the 51st state? It's not just come out of nowhere. It's been in conversation for a long time because some districts in Canada really want to leave Canada and join the US. And it would be a massive boom to both the economies, whether it's lower taxes, fuel will be cheaper, military power from America to Canada and all that kind of stuff. People have previously also said, hey, New Zealand might join Australia as a different state, right? Again, it's about understanding what is the benefit of doing these things. But what you're saying about the woke agenda, it's a signal. Money is always a signal. They are using our money against us. And if people look at the profits and what we mentioned before, the money doesn't exist. Jump on interest.co.nz today and look at ASB's profits and look how much they're holding across as tier 1 ratio capital compared to how much they've lent out. As I mentioned, the ratio is always 10 to 1, 12 to 1. So they don't have the funds, and that's why they don't want bank runs. But most people haven't woken up to the fact that they don't even have the money, but they're still telling us how to live our lives. That is the unfortunate truth. And the other thing with these banks, as I mentioned in America, how Donald Trump has come out and said there will be no CBDC. I had told you last year as well, they will quietly do it through the banks. So in America, they have a problem because they have a constitution. They cannot have a central bank digital currency, and the government can't go look into your bank accounts. But the banks can. And that is why you have debanking on stupid reasons where they say you have a political view or because you did this or because you did that. See, in the UK, people are going to jail just for a Facebook comment. So we're going into a stupid world, and the banks are the ones who are going to control the agenda as compared to the government being seen as controlling the agenda. So banks will create their own fictitious cryptocurrencies. JP Morgan already has their own coin. HSBC is working on something as well in Asia. So you just got to understand now the CBDC will just get launched through the banks, and they will say it's for your convenience and for your ease factor as they shut down more branches around the country.
Farzin, great to catch up again. We'll
Always
see you
a
again in a few weeks from now. Things are moving so quickly that I'm expecting next chat will be electrifying. Good to talk and see you again in 2025. And thanks for being on Money Talks again on RCR.